Okay, this video is going to be a little bit more interesting. We're going to actually make an HTML page where we have one item for sale, and then we're going to have you click a button and calculate the price of the item with the given tax rate. So this is simulating making a shopping cart on a business website. Okay, so make a new file. This is going to be called shoppingcart.html. Okay, we start with our initial framework. Okay, we got the doc type. We got the HTML element. It has two elements under it: head and body. The head has title, so this is going to be what shows up in the tab. Alright, and we'll go ahead and make an H1 tag on top. Okay, so let's save this. Here's my shopping cart. Okay, if I open the dev console, which you can do that with Shift-Control-I, or you can go into more tools, developer tools. See, on mine it says Shift-Control-I. Depending on what operating system you have, it might be different characters. Okay, this allows us to look at the elements in our HTML, and then the console. This is the debugging console. So anything we console.log shows up under here. Alright, so this looks right so far. Oops, I got shopping cart. Let me change that. There we go. Alright, so first let's find an item to sell. Let's say we want to sell a football. Okay. So here's an image of a football. Okay, let's see. Copy link address. If you right click on the image, you copy, here, open link in a new tab. That is the image. Okay, I want to copy the link address. Okay, Chrome just downloads it when you put it in there. But what I can do, since I copied the link address, I can create an image. IMG tag. The source attribute is the HTTP reference. It's the path to the file. And that file can be hosted on your computer, so on the server, the CS server, or it can be hosted somewhere else. So here I'm just copying the web address to the image directly. That way I don't have to actually copy the image over to my system. Alright, the alt text is an accessibility feature. So if your browser doesn't display images or something like that, you can have additional text that says okay, and what that does, so if we go back to our image, if you hover over it, this is huge, we need to change that. We'll make the style property There we go. width 200. PX. There we go. Okay, so we're going to sell a football. The alt text should be what shows up if the image doesn't display. I thought it was supposed to show up if you just hovered over it. Let's look it up. Yeah, if the image cannot be displayed, the alt attribute provides alternative information for an image. Okay, so that's kind of like on the canvas element. If your browser doesn't support canvas, the inside text of the canvas element is displayed, and you say can't display the canvas element. Alright, so we have an image of what we're selling, and we're going to say BR tag adds a space. We're going to say make an H6 tag, price, H6, and then we're going to say the price is at $20. I don't know, $15. Make another H5 tag. Let's say it's $15. Okay, let's make these span tags, because the H tags are going to make them new lines. We'll just make the whole thing span. Okay, the price is $15. Now we say okay, we're going to make an input. And we're going to set the initial value to 0. Get rid of that. So the input type is text, and the initial value is 0. We're going to say the ID, which the ID attribute is that ID stands for identifier. It's a unique identifier. So in your HTML, it's an error if you ever have two elements with the exact same ID. The point is to uniquely identify the element. If two elements have the same ID, it's impossible to uniquely identify them by the ID attribute. Okay? So ID should be unique. So this is going to be football quantity. Alright. Okay, quantity 0. Okay, so this is looking good so far. Now we need to make our JavaScript. Okay, so we're going to make a function called calculate price. Alright. And we're going to need a button under here. That calls this function, calculate price. Okay, so on click, this is where the on click attribute on a button, on anything really, but especially designed for buttons, is an attribute where inside the string value of the attribute is what JavaScript is executed when you click on it. So since we're defining this function down here, when you click on this button, you can just type calculate price, and it will look for this function and call it. Okay, so let's put an extra BR tag in here. Console.log. Okay, this is just going to let us know that it's working. Alright, let's refresh. Calculate price. If we look in our console, I misspelled it. Okay, so now this is important. When you look in the console, you can see what errors there are. There's no errors when the page loads. As soon as I click this button, this function gets executed. Alright? Whatever I typed in here, but I misspelled it. So it tells me, it says, okay, there's an error. It's in red, uncaught reference error. Calculate price is not defined. Okay, it's a spelling error, but it tells you where it is, and it tells you it's in shoppingcart.html at line 16. Okay, so here Adam numbers your lines, line 16. There it is. It's my spelling error. Calculate price. Okay, so that's very important. That helps you figure out what's going on. Now, since I do have a function named calculate price, I did it here too. Cannot type. Alright. This proves that it's working. Since this function does exist, calculate price was clicked. Alright, so now we're going to do the interesting thing where we find out how many items they have typed into the box, and if they type in a number, which we have to verify that they typed in a number, we would do our mathematical calculation to determine how much the price of the items, all their items, is going to be. Okay, so let's start. First, underneath we have to add an element that we're going to put our output data on. Okay, so this is going to be okay, so the total price, and then we're going to have, let's put a dollar value here, and then this element is going to be where we output our data. So we give it an ID, and it has to uniquely identify this element, this span right here. Okay, it's the ID for this entire element, and it must be different than any other ID on the site. Okay, so we'll call this total price. Okay, so document get element by ID. The ID we want to first get is this input. So this is, boy, I cannot type today. Quantity. There we go. Football quantity. Okay, so this is going to be the HTML element. I want to store that. And we can just call it input element. That's EL. It stands for element. You can name it whatever you want. Okay, so this should be our HTML element. Let's log it to make sure we've got what we think. Reload the page. Sure enough, here's the element. We're just looking on our console, we logged it out, and it even highlights it when you hover over it. So that's good. Now we want to get the value that they have typed in there. So we're going to create a variable input text. This is just a variable and you can name it whatever you want. So we take the input element and access the .value property. Now we're just logging this to make sure we're getting what we think. Reload the page. Input text is 0. 13. Calculate price. Input text is 13. Okay, so notice this is just a string right now. Let's do the type of input text. Type is string. Okay, we need to convert that to an integer value. Okay, so we're going to use parse int. Alright, so we have a variable number, or we'll call it quantity. And we're going to set that equal to input. We're going to parse int of input text. Okay, input text is the value, the string value of whatever they typed in here. And where the parse int is a built-in function that converts the string data into integer data. So we'll do console.log of quantity, and we'll do, just go ahead and say and then the type of that. Refresh the page, calculate the price. Quantity is 0, the type is number. If we do 13, okay, quantity is 13, the type is number. Okay, let's say we added an A character. JavaScript is very forgiving. It tries to parse the string from the beginning until it's an invalid character, and it will stop at the invalid character. So if we put the A at the beginning, calculate the price, you get this. Quantity is NaN. That stands for not a number. Okay, it's a special JavaScript value. Okay, the data type is number, but it doesn't have a value in the same way that numbers do. Okay, so math operations won't work very well. So let's open Node and show you an example. So NaN is a special keyword. Capital N, lowercase a, capital N. Okay. Type of NaN is a number. Okay. Is 5 greater than NaN? False. Is 5 less than NaN? False. If you have NaN, that can't be true. Does 5 equal NaN? False. Does NaN equal NaN? False. So all of these common Boolean expressions don't work with NaN. Even NaN is not equal to itself. That one's actually pretty strange because undefined is a keyword too. Okay, and if you say is undefined equal to undefined, that's true. But no instance of NaN equals the same instance of NaN. Okay, so that's kind of strange part of JavaScript. Okay, so that gets into the weeds a little bit with understanding how JavaScript historically was implemented and all that. But the important thing is if you try to parse a string value and you're unable to parse it, the value you get back is NaN. Okay. So what we want to do is let's ignore how to deal with that problem to start with, and we'll just assume they type in good information. Alright. I believe there's a function, I think it's is NaN that's built in. And that's how you determine if your value is an NaN number instead of doing NaN equal equal or equal equal equal, triple equals. So is 5 not a number? False, it is a number. Is the string foo not a number? It's correct, it is not a number. Okay. Alright, so we get this quantity, and it can either be an integer value or this NaN value. So let's say if is NaN, and that stands for not a number, if our quantity, okay, this is the argument to the is not a number function. So if that returns true, we're going to log something. You must type an integer value for the quantity. And then we're going to return from our function, which means anything below here will not get executed. Return is where the code execution of the function stops, and whatever value you provide here, I could provide it a value 6 or some string. Okay, that would be returned as the value for the function after it executed. Here I don't want it to return any value, so I just return, and that's the same as return undefined. Okay, so let's look at that in Node real quick. Function return function foo return foo. Okay, so when I call foo, the thing that gets returned is the string foo. If I make this return the number 7, if I call foo, the thing that gets returned is 7. Okay, if I return nothing and call foo, undefined gets returned. Okay, because it's an undefined value no value basically. Alright, so that's what we're doing here. We're ending the program early. Or we're ending the function early, calculate price, because they entered bad data, so we don't want to try to make a calculation based on that bad data. We just go ahead and stop executing the function. And we give them a little error message here. So let's look at this. Calculate price. That's good so far. Let's enter in bad data. Calculate price. You must type an integer value for the quantity. Alright, so let's get rid of some of these console.logs. It's cluttering up what we're doing here. So I'm just going to comment them out because I might want to look at them again later. Calculate price clicked. Okay, that first one. Alright, so assuming this part is not a number is false, this block of code will get executed and will never return from the function. So we'll keep going in this function. So this is a check for valid input. Okay, now at this point we should have valid input. So this actually checks for integer input. Now we need to check for valid integer input. So valid integer input means it has to be the number 0 or higher. If it's less than 0, you can't buy a negative amount of footballs because then you'd be selling them. Okay, so we need to check and make sure that quantity is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, if it is greater than or equal to 0, then we're good. So if it's not, we need to give them a console.log message and tell them that they need a positive integer. Okay, so if quantity is less than 0, we're going to do that. So this is a check for positive integer. You must type a positive integer value for the quantity. Okay, so let's reload that. We've got negative 13 or negative 12. You must type a positive integer value. Okay, so quantity here, if we uncomment that, we see quantity was converted. Negative 12. Calculate the price. The quantity was converted to a number, so that's good. So in this if statement, is it NaN? No, it's not NaN. It was a number. So this block of code gets skipped, and we move on to this. Is that number less than 0? Yes, it was. So then we run this code. If it's invalid data, we want to return out of the function again. We want to break the execution of code. Okay. So here, at this point in the code, we should have valid integer data. Okay. So let's calculate the price. The total price. So we have price, which is $15. That's what we set our price at in the HTML. We have a tax rate equals 0.07%, and we have our total price that we want to calculate. Alright, So our total price is going to be the quantity times the price. Okay, and that is going to be multiplied by 1 plus the tax rate. Okay, let's start with a simple console log to make sure this is calculating correctly. Total price. Okay. Price is not a function. Oops. I need to do multiplication there. Okay, so what it did there is it thought I was calling a function named price, right? Because I had 2 parentheses after it. I forgot my multiplication symbol. Okay, so as you encounter these errors, you'll start to understand. They're kind of cryptic at first, but once you see them more and more, you'll start understanding what they mean. And again, it's really important. It shows you where it is in shoppingcart.html on line 49. Okay, here's line 49. Here we go, price. And you see, look at it and see what's wrong. Okay, so it's really nice. Once you start decoding how these work, you can edit your code and figure out what's wrong with it pretty easily. All right, so 0, the total price is 0. That makes sense. Okay, let's get 1 item. Calculate price. Okay, $16.05. Let's get 10 items. $160.50. Let's get 13,000 items. Okay, so the last thing we have to do is we're going to put that data in the HTML. Most people who visit websites don't have the dev console open. Okay, so they need to see it on the actual HTML. Right? So instead of logging it to the console, what we're going to do is we're going to get our element, our output element. And it's going to be document.getElement by ID. That ID we have up here is total price. Okay, that's what we want to put the total price data in. Okay, so let's we have this output element, and we're going to change the inner text of the element. That's the child text. We're going to say the inner text is equal to total price. Now total price is a number here. Let's see if that works. I think it should. I think JavaScript will be forgiving here. Let's do 10, calculate price. Yeah, it was forgiving. It didn't require us to have string data here. Okay, so that's nice. So now you can see as you type in items, calculate price, 224. Okay. Now later we're going to learn how to truncate this and get a nice clean price, and always make sure there's 2 zeros and format the data properly. But that is enough. This is a really basic shopping cart. This shows you the power of the web and how you can actually use it to calculate transactions and do something, you know, useful and actually make a living doing this stuff. Okay, so this is a really simple shopping cart example. All right, that's all we have for this one.